my friends, again to the Fat Man GM's revisitation of MERP, Iron Crown Enterprises Middle-earth role-playing game system. Started in the 80s, played through the early 90s, I believe, and then, went out of business, such as it is. This particular module is called the Assassins of Dol Amroth. Now, as you've come to know, if you've followed some of these others of mine, I have mixed opinions on modules in general. And in the early days of MERP, most modules were mini source books in some aspects, that they were tied into a specific location or a very small location, but important in Middle Earth, and it would give you background information and maps, a little better and closer in-depth descriptions of the location and environment and so on, and then some adventures tossed in. And then the game system took off, and they expanded, and in the rush to crank out basically what it is, like all game systems, they want to put out as much stuff as they can while the iron's hot, so to speak, and to keep interest in the system itself going, for monetary reasons, of course. Isn't that why they do this stuff? Quality of modules slipped in some aspects. It became more and more the cookie cutter McDonald's brand style of stuff that you find in Dungeons and Dragons and a dozen other game systems. It's just another module that could easily have been played into another game system. And every now and then, though, they either got a writer or a group of writers who knew their stuff or had inspiration to create something, and then so they come out with something like this that's fairly decent. You'll never hear me go, it's the most greatest thing ever made, because I don't believe in that sort of thing, because everything is really good. There's varying layers of good and greatness, but there's always something else. And they get the one great perfect thing, everything else would be dull and uninspiring compared to it, which is not their goal. If you want to make a successful game system thrive, you just can't do that unless you can manage to pull it off every time, which no, not going to happen. Anyhow, Assassins of Dol Amroth is 3 adventures set up in Dol Amroth, and Dol Amroth is a principality in western Gondor. It's very important geographical and geopolitical location. The founding nobility were given a royal license, so to speak, to create their own mini kingdom, hence the term principality. They are semi-anonymous. They do enforce the Gondor's king's laws, but they more or less rule under their own guise and aegis and follow their own set of whatever. The setting is well crafted, because your player characters, first off, they give you a range of NPC characters that are their storylines, while short, are well crafted. I think they give you a lot of information in a few paragraphs, and then they let you make the decision. Your player characters can pick from this list of potential player characters that they could play, or you can use them as background NPCs as you need, and they can create their own. But the scripting is pretty tight in this aspect. There's not a lot of wiggle room here for people veering off the track, so the players, you need to sit down with the players and explain to some degree that while having liberty to go and do what you want is okay in most cases, the sandbox is very small here, and they need to try to stay within the script within reason with that. And it's up to the GM. It's up to you to help make sure that they stay within that boundary, so to speak, and follow the script, because otherwise the second and third adventures don't play well if you don't follow them in order, and in the order that they're created. Now, part of the reason is that we don't know much about the assassin in the first adventure until we get to the second the second set of the book, which in there it gives you a much greater detail. And in a nutshell, this was a young, disenfranchised young man who blames the Prince of Dol Amroth and his family for the death of his father, and has been seeking some sort of revenge for many years. While out in the wilderness, he stumbled across a bag of talismans, which belonged to a really old religion that worships Suron, but he has no clue and didn't understand any of that. But he follows some inner instinct or hidden, instructions how to set these things up in such a manner that they released their magic, which imbued themselves into him. So he became more charismatic and more capable, and then had the knowledge he needed to teach himself how to become an assassin. It starts out sounding like it would be like a typical thieves guild kind of a setup, but it's more of a a beginning terrorist organization and less of a assassin for hire, which is what traditionally in most RPGs, assassins are either NPCs or players who, for coin, they're mercenaries. They go out and they eliminate somebody for money. Or in items or magic or favor, but they don't do it for ideological reasons or for revenge reasons or so on and so on. And so we see that in here where they've well developed the characters, especially the key bad guy here. And so the PCs are on at the docks for some reason, and they witness a murder, and it's every indication is pretty clear cut. They're to chase the bad guy. So they chase the bad guy into what is your traditional rundown warehouse. They even give you some information on the owner of the warehouse, why it's in the condition that it's in, what happened to him and his family fortune, but he has nothing to do with the Shades, as the Assassins organization calls himself. You go through the typical mini dungeon crawl, if you will, room to room, section to section, so on, hunting this guy down, and you are thwarted at every attempt, and at some point the assassin escapes, but not without leaving a trail. This leads us to chapter number 4. Chapter 4 is once again the NPCs have, in this case, they've been invited to a party at a local retired noble's home out in the countryside. We don't know exactly. I guess they leave that up to the GM to figure out how the PCs have any why they would be infamous or famous enough or connected enough to get invitations to this sort of thing. But it's implied that this fella that's throwing the party is he's a wealthy merchant. It's implied that this fella is notorious for throwing some pretty wild parties. And so anyway, they're on their way to the party and they get ambushed by the assassin and his cater of assassin trainees, the Shades. So the options here are, of course, for out and outright combat. Ideally, the party will eliminate half of the NPC, the attacking party, and then the attacking party will dissipate into the countryside, and you go on and deal with the issues at the manor, which are tied to this group, or the key assassin, if you will, and you solve the mystery at the manor. Then we have this leads you to chapter 3 or encounter 3, however you want to look at it. And in this particular one, it's where things come to a head, and we get far more information on the assassin himself, his history. It's actually almost a page and a half of material, to be honest. It sets the setting, explains his group, how he trains them, how they're equipped. Now, a couple things to note in here. Some of the items. First off, as part of the dark power he gets from unknowingly from Sauron is this ability to craft magical items of a limited degree, smaller, minor items. The backstory for this guy is that he spends better part of 30 years learning how to do all this stuff. He starts out as a boy and gets corrupted by Sauron's magic, and then over time, through Sauron's his unwitting tutelage under Sauron's spirit, if you will, he develops all these abilities and uh, the ability to craft magic items and so on and so forth. This isn't something that just happened. So he's been plotting his revenge for a long time. Now, some of the items he's able to create are he can create the gray cloaks that the members of his little group wear. These cloaks are once a day. They're cloaks of invisibility, good for once a day. So it's limited invisibility. And there are several items and talismans that give protection and allow for, enhance the stealthy skill set that would-be assassins would need. So we have this very, like I said, as modules go, it's a very tight woven set of stories that build off of each other. So individually, you could take out one of these encounters and toss them into, we're just having a slow day in our game world, so we could borrow this and run the scenario and just change the names and the place, who done it kind of stuff. But as an actual module cell, I like it. Although they call it ready to run adventures, of course, as we all know, the adventure module, right? So Assassin to Dol Amroth, it's not a bad one at all compared to some of the others. I think this one is in the top 5. I used it 3 times, once in a Middle Earth setting and twice as D&D. I just changed the names and stuff on it, and it's useful for a few odds and ends. And then there's a few sets of mechanics, including dealing with, I think, the subchapter on dealing with being, I don't want to call it Agent of Sauron, but how people with a bad attitude or bad experiences can be easily corrupted by Sauron. So the darkness that surrounds him anyway. There you go. There you have it. On to the next one.